wait. I guess he does. This one.
Do what the screen says.
Do what the screen says?
Does this count?
We're not gonna get in trouble anymore.
Very good, interesting. Sit down. Let me just put it at you for a second. This is the first time this has ever happened. Nobody flipped me off. What's going on?
It's disrespectful.
It's disrespectful.
Also in high school, that would have gotten you in trouble.
I would say maybe it's respectful to do what your professor tells you to do. So, it's disrespectful now, yes,
I
sir.
mean, I for one was okay with doing everything until it went against my morals. So.
Okay. And so you were gonna do what the screen told you, and then your morals showed up, and you were like, no, I'm not gonna do that one. Okay. What else? You look like you wanted to. Jack, why don't you come up here?
What?
Come here. Sit down right here, please. Give you one more shot, 6 feet. Give you one more shot. Flip me off.
I'm not going, no.
Why? What's going on? Why
What?
not?
Actually, it's just rude. I'm not gonna do that.
I'm telling you to. It's rude not to.
It's not rude not to. It's rude to do it.
Oh, I don't get you, man. I mean,
Well, you must not get anybody then.
I guess not. All right, have a seat. He says to the psychologist, go sit down. Here, no, I'll do it. Try to flip the camera off. So, what we're talking about this week is social psychology. That's not helpful. We're talking about social psychology. So, as I said, this is the first time this never works. Usually, at least half the class flips me off. Easy. Like, immediately. Oh, we get to do it. Today, you all stared at me kind of strange, as if just asked you to, murder me in public. What do you think the difference was, by the way? I know you've never been in this class before, but any differences you think?
Because there's a lot less people in here and each individual person's more noticeable.
Okay, so there's a lot less people, and so I can see you more. You can imagine if this room were filled up, you might feel a little more anonymous. Good, keep that in your head. That'll come up. What else? Yeah.
Well, if anyone else that done it in the room, people probably would have followed suit.
Very good. Nobody did it, so
Yeah.
nobody else did it. If we'd had one kind of leader in that respect, you might have seen a couple other folks follow suit, and that is typically what happens. Again, some folks will do it immediately, and then you'll see other folks looking around and saying, oh, other people are doing this? Okay, I'm gonna do it too. Good. Someone else. I think it was a camera. I think usually I don't have a camera in class. And here I made a bit of a production about setting it up on the stage, pointed right at you. So I think also you felt a little bit of pressure, or somebody might see this, it's gonna put it on the internet. So what we're talking about, again, is social psychology. And social psychology is interested in how the situation how the situation affects the individual's psychology. So it's still psychology, because if you remember, psychology, different than many of the other social sciences, is interested in the individual's mind. Sociology, for instance, is interested in the group. Anthropology, interested in the culture. History, interested sometimes in the individual, but generally in the larger culture or community. Psychology is the one discipline that is very specifically focused on the individual, but people are in groups. People are in situations. People are in context. And so social psychologists argue that the larger influence on you is actually your situation rather than your own internal state. So again, here, usually when I get folks to do this, again, you guys screwed up my demonstration, but that's okay. This guy in particular, I'll hold it against you. Usually when people do this, I come around and I say, why did you flip me off? Imagine you did, what would you say?
Because you told me to do it.
Because I told you to do it, is exactly right. Which is to say, you didn't flip me off because you wanted to. That's what you tell me, at least. You didn't flip me off because you wanted to. You flipped me off because something in the situation made that happen. I'll go on to emphasize that maybe this instruction, though it goes against your morals, came from an authority figure, even though it's against an authority figure. It came from an authority figure, and that perhaps influenced you more than your own moral state, right? Than your own sense of, this is what I should do, this is what I shouldn't do. Again, I would add for this class, there's fewer people in here. You feel more noticed. I put you on camera. You feel a lot more noticed. And so here we have a situation where I overplayed the situation, right? This wasn't strong enough to get rid of all of these other situational, and in addition to your own individual sense of what you wanted to do. Questions just about this? I got it back.
To answer that question, we set up a hidden camera experiment to see if this woman would stand up at the sound of his tone, simply because everyone else is. You might be thinking you'd never go along with this. Or would you? Just 3 beats, and without knowing why she's doing it, this woman is now conforming perfectly to the group. But what happens if we take the group away?
Elaine, please. Now she's alone, the crowd is gone, and nobody is watching her, except our hidden cameras. What do you think she'll do? She's now conforming to the rules of the group without them even being there. Now, watch what happens when we introduce another outsider who doesn't know the rules. Have a seat, and they'll be out in just a couple minutes. Thanks so much. Think she'll teach the new guy what to do? We kept the cameras rolling as more unsuspecting patients arrived. And slowly but surely, what began as a random rule for this woman has now become the social norm for everyone in this waiting room. Here to explain what's going on in their brains is Jonah Berger of the University of Pennsylvania.
This sort of internalized form of programming is part of what we call social learning. Starting at a very early age, when we see members of our group perform a task, our brains literally reward us for following in their footsteps.
When I saw everybody stand up, I felt like I needed to join them. Otherwise, I'm like excluded. Once I decided to go with it, then I felt much more comfortable.
Conformity is how we become socialized, but it can also cause us to develop bad habits or repeat past wrongs.
And it's why even this rebel, who wasn't standing for any of this nonsense, eventually joined the ranks. And the only thing more shocking than seeing how easily conformity affects the way you act is that similar forces are subconsciously shaping the way you think right now.
All right. What did I show you that for? Talk to me about the social psychology of what you just saw there.
She didn't want to be left out.
She didn't want to feel left out, right? So she says that, right? She says, I saw everybody else doing it. I felt like if I didn't do it, I was going to be left out somehow. And so she started doing it herself. Good. What else?
Showed how easily we can conform.
It shows how easily we can conform. What does that word mean, conform?
Like adapt to, kind of, or change our behavior to somebody else's.
Yeah, it means to change our behavior, and sometimes even our way of thinking, to match the group, right? To match the situation, but usually with conformity, it's a group. You could conform to a sign, right? I tried to get you to do that. You could conform to, a mandate, wear a mask to class. So you can still conform to things even if it's not necessarily people, but generally we think about it as that matching of behavior, of that doing what the other folks are doing in that very situation, just like you saw here. The other thing I find fascinating about this, of course, and they don't show you the longer one I tried to show you, it shows you the build up to that where she comes in and everybody else is, when we use this word in social psychology, confederate, and that just means they're in on the experiment. They're not actually a subject, they're actually with the researchers and they're just doing something that we told them to do. And so here, when she first comes in, everybody's a confederate, everybody's standing up because the researcher said, hey, just do this and see what she does. And then she brings in all these other folks, or the researcher brings in all these other folks and takes out the confederates, and we're looking to see, will she transmit this information? Will she communicate this conformity to these other subjects, right? So the rest of the folks that came in were also subjects. They didn't know what was going on. Yes, ma'am?
I also kind of feel like it could be out of fear, maybe not in that situation, but something similar. They see everybody doing something and they have no way of knowing what happens to them if they don't do it, like the consequences, because no one's not doing it.
Very good. Yes, I mean, that's great, right? So this is how conformity is born, right? Usually it is going to feel like some bit of fear or some bit of maybe just anxiety or worry or uncertainty, right? Why are they doing this? What happens if I don't do it? You ever see, I don't know what context this would be for y'all, but if you're in an organization or a sports team or something, this might work for a family, and you see everybody going to do something, you're like, did I miss was there a memo, or like, do we have a meeting, right? You get that sense of, oh shit, did I forget to do something? Am I missing out, or am I gonna get in trouble for not being ready for whatever this is, right? And so conformity, yeah, it is gonna have a fear base. It is gonna have this kind of base in what's gonna happen to me if I don't either just fit in, or if I don't do what they're doing, such that, you know, maybe a lion comes in and eats everybody who's sitting when the bell goes off. Good. The other thing I think about this, and is really fascinating about this video in particular, is it demonstrates how traditions are born, right? It demonstrates how, at some point, maybe somebody wrote this down and we wanted to do it, or maybe it just developed out of the blue, something we just tended to do. And then new folks come along and see everybody doing that, and oh, I must have to do that. And it can be so strong that even if it's just one person left, right? If they rebuild the organization, if they rebuild the community, right? It's not too difficult to retransmit those traditions, we'll call them, back into the group. So conformity is a big one. One of the most famous experiments looking at this, that's not a television production, is, I can't remember the name of it, but it's basically another study where they use a Confederate, a group of Confederates, and they've got a bunch of students sitting around a table looking at a board, and on that board are these three lines, line A, B, and C. So sitting around the table are a bunch of students, and one of these students is our actual subject, and the rest of these are our Confederates. That is to say, they're in on the experiment. They're just doing what we want. We're really only interested in what this guy does. So we bring these folks into the room. Oh, by the way, all of these Confederates are seniors, and this guy is a freshman. So we go around the table, starting with this senior, working our way around until we end up with the freshman, and we say, tell us which of these lines is longer. And everybody says line A is the longest line. What happens when we get to the freshman? What's he gonna say? He's gonna say A, right? Another demonstration of conformity, that even though this is clear, this is not a thing you need to be a senior in college to figure out, right? 3-year-old could get this, pre-operational could get this. And yet this guy here says that A is the longest line, again, just from conformity. So let's look at some rules, or just some things that we can glean from this idea of social psychology and how the situation can influence the individual. So the first piece to know is just that situations are powerful. Situations are powerful. We often underestimate the amount of influence that a situation can bring, or how much influence or power a situation has. And if you begin to examine your life, certainly your moment by moment decisions, you will often find that you probably did a thing not because you necessarily wanted to, but because it's just what's done, or it's what everybody else was doing. Why is everybody wearing a shirt with a neck and 3 holes in it, rather than a toga, or a kilt, or a robe, or a cape, right? Just so happens that we all wear the same thing in this country, probably more similar things in this state, in this region of the state, right? And really, you might just call that culture, but really it is a type of conformity. It is a type of social psychology. We're probably the situation, whether that's just what's available to you. What can you buy at Walmart? What can you buy at the mall? What can you buy at Nordstrom? They don't sell many togas that I've seen, right? But whatever it was, you made a decision based out of the situation. And probably if they sold togas, you might not buy one. You'd buy one for maybe a party or Halloween, but you probably wouldn't wear it to class. What are people gonna say if I show up in this toga? Now I said that once, and the next week the guy showed up in the toga. So, but he wouldn't have done that if I hadn't have said it. So the situation still influenced it. Aha. Just gonna use some ellipses. Situations are often invisible. I'd say usually invisible. That is to say, we tend to be really unaware of the situation that we're in any given moment. We tend to be unaware of how that situation, the moment-to-moment situation that we're in, is actually influencing our behavior. If I was a space alien and I walked into this classroom and I'm observing what humans do, I might surmise that the normal way of human interaction is that one person talks and everybody else is just always quiet and maybe writing down what that person says. If I went to a party this weekend, I'd probably see the same thing. One person talking and everybody writing things down. Is that right? Is that how you party? He says no. But you're acting this way, right? Not because it's who you are again, but because it's what the situation requires. It's not necessarily conformity, though it probably was at some point when you were little, when nobody else is talking, nobody else is passing notes, nobody else is throwing spitballs, until they were. But by now, it's just the situation. You know what to do in here. Situations it's not gonna work, but situations vary from person to person. Even within, and this is the important rest of this, even within the same environment. Situations vary from person to person, even within the same environment. You start in the black. What situation are you in right now?
Class.
You're in the past?
Class.
Is it time travel? You're in the class, okay. What is maybe different about your situation than everybody else's in this moment?
I don't know.
Who can help it? Yeah.
He's putting you kind of in the spotlight right now, making me have a conversation with him.
Very good.
All these people.
That's right. You were in a conversation with me, and these other folks weren't. I was making you talk, maybe making you a little nervous, made you stop writing. Hope you got that last part. Right, but that's different than what everybody else was in. Then again, situations being invisible, and often we don't notice how our situation is different than everybody else's, right? It's a bit of egocentrism. You might connect those two things. The other thing is that your situation isn't necessarily just your external environment. What else might be different for you than is different for somebody sitting next to you, even if I'm not speaking to them? Maybe different with you two guys.
Probably just how we feel physically, like how comfortable we are and how warm we are.
Very good. So maybe just kind of your physical state, how much clothes you have on, how your body temperature reacts to the environment. Very good. We are in a psychology class. She's got it. We'll let him squirm a little bit. Tell him.
I was just also thinking of mental illness, like anxiety, OCD, even ADHD. That would be harder to sit here and listen to someone
Very good. So all of those things, and you've taken it to a specific place, which is to say maybe a mental illness, or maybe maybe it's just some symptoms of those mental illnesses, right? But it doesn't have to be that far away. It might just be that I'm hungry and she's not, right? Well, I'm in a whole different situation. She's hungry and she's not, right? That's going to put you in a different space in terms of, I wish he'd hurry up. I wish we could get out of here. Or, I really enjoy what he's saying. Or, I usually really enjoy what he's saying, but he's boring today. Whatever it is, right? That your own mental state is also going to be your own situation. That it's also going to shape the environment or the context that you're in that moment. It's important. The other thing is, we're not very good at determining how situations influence us. We're not very good at knowing when the situation is having an impact and when it's not, when we're just normal, whatever that means. Of course, you're always in a situation, so when are you normal? So we're not really good at determining when we're being influenced by a situation, and we are worse. We are worse. We are worse at determining how situations influence others. We are worse at determining how situations influence others. We often don't really know why people do the things that they do, especially people we don't know very well. If you know somebody really intimately, you might come closer to that, but certainly somebody you just see, so certainly somebody you just know from class or know in class, you're probably not very good at knowing why they're doing the things that they do. So we do this so often. That social psychologists have named it the fundamental attribution error. The fundamental attribution error. What does fundamental mean? Does it mean something's fundamental?
Like the basics.
It's the basics, right? So it's kind of the foundation, you might say, perhaps. What does attribution mean?
An added thing, right?
Say again?
Like an added thing, like it's an attribute, like it's part of something, but it's not like.
Good. Yes. Let me pronounce it differently. It is the same word. Attribute, not attribute. Okay. They're still the same. One's a verb. I'm asking for the verb meaning. What does it mean to attribute something? To what do you attribute the cold weather? What do you? I'll give you until I find my video. To attribute something, or attribution, means it's cause, right? To what do you attribute something just means, what is the cause of that thing? What caused it to happen, right? And so when we say attribution in psychology, we're asking the question, what caused that action? What caused that thought? What caused that feeling? To what do you attribute that feeling, that behavior, that action, right? So basic attribution, basic cause error. The basic error of understanding cause is what this is. And the fundamental attribution error says that when we see somebody else doing something, we tend to attribute their behavior to their own psychology. Somebody walks in here, and they yell, "UCM sucks," and they run out. We would tend to just go, "That guy's an asshole. What an idiot. What a disruptive fellow," right? And then we leave class, I don't know, and we see a bunch of mobsters, I don't know, holding him at gunpoint, saying, "All right, now go to the other classroom and tell him UCM sucks." Right? The idea just is that we don't tend to think about that. We don't even tend to ask that question. Why did he do that? He's probably a nice guy. Why would he do something like that, right? We usually don't start there. We usually start with, that asshole. You see him on campus in a week, and that's an asshole that came out of class. Or maybe you think it's hilarious. That guy's real funny. Dude, it was the worst day of my life. They had guns pointed at me. Right? So we don't know why people do the things they do, and we tend to attribute it to the individual themselves. What do you think happens when we're like that? What do you think happens when, I come into class and I'm like, "You suck today, man. I just wish you'd be a better student. Sit closer." And I leave and I'm like, that's kind of rude to that guy. What do you think I tell myself? I'm such an asshole. Think I say that?
No, you reassure yourself it's okay because you were having a bad day or something
Just
happened
having
to
a
you.
bad day. Very good, right? I didn't eat enough this morning. I'm just having a bad day. It's not. I'm not a mean guy, man. I just get that way sometimes. Or you understand? That happens to you. Meanwhile, if you're late again, I just know you're that kind of guy, right? And so we do this. This is the error. That when we're looking at somebody else's behavior, we tend to go, "That's who they are." When we're thinking about ourselves, especially when it's something a little negative, we tend to go, "Well, I was having a bad day." We find all these other reasons that it's something outside of ourselves. Again, we do this so much. That we call it the fundamental attribution error. All right, this is hilarious. And the students never laugh at it, but I think it gets the point across. So enjoy a little classic Seinfeld. What's going on there?
He was in the pool. He got cold.
He's in the pool, he got cold. What's the attribution error here? See you smiling big.
Me?
Oh,
Or him?
Him first.
I don't know.
It's just funny.
I don't know.
His pants were off.
His pants are off. What's the attribution error? Why did I show that to you?
She laughed.
Hold on. Yes, ma'am.
She
Let
laughed.
somebody else answer.
God. See, this, by the way, I've erased conformity, but this is a Midwestern thing. This is a Midwestern conformity thing. If I was in, I don't know, Texas or Florida or New York, they'd be like, "Oh, you want to talk about dicks? Listen, me. Everybody here's like, "Oh, no." Yeah.
She assumed his thingy was small because he was cold.
She
And
assumed
she
this.
saw it only as that.
Right, so she assumed, right, here's the attribution error. She saw something about him, she saw some quality about him, and she immediately assumes, here's our fundamental attribution error, that's who you are, that's that guy, he's just an asshole. He's just this guy. And from his perspective, George's character's name, he's saying, no, it was the environment. This is an environmental reaction. This is not how I usually am, right? This is the fundamental attribution error shown in terms of behavior, but usually when we're thinking about this in psychology, we're thinking about it in terms of how someone's, not their body makeup, but something that they're actually doing and what that reflects on their own psychology. So, any questions about this idea of attribution? These are two terms, by the way. I didn't write them both out, but attribution is its own term, and then fundamental attribution error is also its own term. So attribution, just figuring out the cause, and then this error, of course, is about how we tend to think about that cause. Questions about this? Fundamental attribution error. Okay. So this is one of my favorite sections in psychology, so we'll be continuing this probably for the next 2 weeks. I'll post probably some of these videos I've shown in class. I'll post some of the ones I'll probably show on Thursday. One of them is probably the sort of premier video that you would show, the premier experiment that gets shown in these type of general psychology classes. It's called the Stanford Prison Experiment. And it takes a look. This guy was interested. His question was, how does evil come about? How do people become bad people? And so he puts them in a situation to see if he can kind of make that show up. And sure enough, we see some fireworks. So look out for that. That'll probably be on Thursday. Again, we'll probably keep talking about this at least halfway through next week. Also, one of the things I say in yesterday's lecture that will probably be up later tonight is that you should expect your test to be posted later this week. It won't be on this stuff, it'll be on sensation perception, learning conditioning, and human development, those past 3 sections, and it may be a weird test. I'll say more about it. I say more about it in yesterday's video, so take a look at that. All right.
This week is